Hi, I'm Josh, and in this video I wanted to talk about this little box of rainbow lights called the Donner MEDO. It's a looper and groovebox that's geared towards beginner musicians, and I want to say up front, you might notice that this video is marked as sponsored. I'm not getting any money from Donner, and I'm not getting any money if you go out and buy one of these. There is a link down in the description to buy one of these, and you can use code JOSH to get 15% off. Again, I'm not profiting off of that, and I'm not telling you to go out and buy one, but it's an option if you watch this video and you're very interested, just wanted to make sure you know. So let's get to talking about MEDO, its strengths, its weaknesses. Maybe we'll learn something about ourselves along the way. And as we're going on, if you know that I'm pronouncing its name incorrectly, please leave a comment and let me know. Anyway, let's jump in. So I feel like the best way to address the question of what the Donner MEDO is and the implied companion question of whether or not it's right for you is going to be to make a little beat on it. And before we start, I wanted to give you a nice view of the MEDO. While I'm using it, I'm going to be holding it like this, and my big meaty paws are going to cover up a lot of the labeling on here. So before we start using it, I'm going to give you a little guided tour of what we have going on here. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of cat hair on it. So MEDO is a looper and has a bunch of different little channels. It has, as the labeling shows, drum, bass, chord, lead, and sample. Let's go through one at a time. Now, drums, exactly what you would expect. You've got different drum sounds. At time of recording, I don't believe that you're able to load in your own drum sounds, but if that information changes either by the time this video goes live or, soon after, I'll try to add a pinned comment with that update. Now, interesting thing about MEDO is that its inputs are not only this front panel, but also you can slap the side of it. I don't know if the microphone is picking this up, but there's a little bit of haptic feedback. The MEDO slightly vibrates whenever I am hitting one of these notes. Now, if I go to the chord, and I know I'm skipping bass, but you'll see why. One other interesting piece of input tech is that MEDO has an accelerometer. So if I play a chord on here, you can hear that it does a filter sweep with the tilt. Now, when you make your own patches for MEDO, you can change what that tilt is going to alter, but I just felt like, the filter is maybe the most easily intuitive thing for it to change. Bass, I don't think you'll be surprised by this, is bass tones, and lead. This is a little patch that I made. That sounds kind of like Mournful Ghosts. All of these you play in the notes on this front panel, and I think you should be able to tell on the camera. The front panel isn't like a keyboard, it's just one flat surface, so you can even slide your finger around. There's a couple other features on here. I can change the octave that this is in, so if I tap the octave button like I just did, and then I tap either left or right, so left it's going to get lower, so I just sent it lower. And then I can bring it back up. And I'm pressing this little button that has the Donner logo and a green light above it. It's like a shift or select button to do these other features. So I hold it to select an instrument, or I hold it to use one of the features here. Now, along with having this sample channel, MEDO also has a built-in microphone, so we can use it to sample with. I don't know if this is just a trend to use these whenever you test a sampler, but I do have a kalimba, so I was like, well, everyone does this with their sampler. Why not? So what it does with the sample is it's going to take it and then repitch it across the buttons on the face. So I'm just going to record the note C, and I'm going to explain what I'm going to do because my hands are going to cover it up as I do it, but I'm going to hold the Donner logo and the sample button, and it'll show red lights coming up, and when it's full then it'll be ready to sample, and I'll hit the note. So And now we have a sample. I quite like having a built-in microphone and a very easy to use sample function. It encourages kind of collecting sound. One of the nice parts of a tiny sampler like this is that you want to, take it everywhere with you. It is battery powered. It charges via USB-C. And so having the built-in microphone and being able to sample on the fly just makes sense. As you can tell, MEDO is pretty minimalistic. There's stuff on the front face, but there's not like a lot going on here. And it has a companion app. So I'm just going to bring in, here's my phone, and I've paired it with MEDO via Bluetooth. You can also use USB-C. I found in testing that the USB-C connection, and this may have just been down to the cable I used, was not as reliable as Bluetooth. Now, when you're in the app, you have a lot of control over different parameters of MEDO. So for instance, I've got the sample here and I can change the coarse and fine tuning. I can change the envelope. So if I wanted to have a longer release or a much shorter one, I prefer the longer release. And if I hit set 2, I also can change its volume and reverb. And I mentioned that there is a looper. You can change how quantized or unquantized you want it. Well, sort of, you've got these 3 options: as recorded, that's unquantized; snap to grid, which is fully quantized; and then groove. For each of these channels, lead, chord, bass, drum, and sample, MEDO can only have one thing like active at a time. So if you wanted to change it, for instance, if I wanted to change what I have for my bass, I can tap on here. And I have different options. If I tap heaviness, it'll load it. I don't care for that one personally. And it's going to be the same also for your own patches and sounds. If I go to collections and I go to synth, you can see that I have some different sounds that I've made and that I can load in. Now, these sounds that say official are coming from Donner, but there's an interesting, I would almost say like social aspect to MEDO, where if I go to library, I can access like all this stuff that's shared in the cloud from other MEDO users. So if I were to go in, and I'm just choosing at random here, I'm going to choose Spacey. If I hit remix, it says loading, and we got to let it think. So it's loaded it now into MEDO, and it's loaded not only the loop that this person has created, but it's also loaded in the sounds. So if I go to, say, the lead sound, that's the one that he had loaded in. If I go to sample, I don't know what that is, but that's what they had loaded in. And if I hit play, I think that we should make our own loop. I'm going to go to collections and I'm going to tap little loop. It's got this really zoomed in picture of me, and I'll hit remix. And it's thinking. We got to let it think. Go, 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 go. So now we have everything loaded in here, except that I forgot to save the sample. Kalimba, remix, load into the MEDO. I'm going to move my phone off screen for a bit, and we'll just work in MEDO. So to start recording, I'm just going to hit the Donner button and record. And we can hear a metronome going. And the metronome will just keep going, but once we start playing something, it'll start recording it into the memory. And now it'll play it back. And we could add a bass. And we could throw in drums. We can add in a hi-hat as well. before I add any more, I wanted to pause and mention something that you might have noticed. Now, these pads on here are velocity sensitive. Something that I've noticed, like I was doing with the hi-hat, is that when you're playing like steady eighth notes like that, it seems to miss inputs or struggle sometimes with the velocity. I don't know if that is a bug or if that is a symptom of my own skill or lack thereof. I don't want to seem unduly generous towards any device, but I also don't want to I don't want to not make space for me to have my own, areas that I need to improve in. So if you notice that, I think that it might be just due to something with the device, but in case I'm just playing poorly, I apologize profusely. We're going to, however, continue and add in a part with the little sample that we recorded earlier. So now I've selected the sample. That came together pretty quickly, but it's also very simple and a short loop. That kind of quick, simple, short loop is, I think, the MEDO's happy spot. It is not what I would reach for if I wanted to make a very long song. Now, the loop that we recorded is present on the phone, and we can play it off of there if we so choose. And you are able to save it as well if I tap this little button here. It's going to ask me for the song info, song title. I'm going to call it Corny Groove. I think it sounds a little, I don't know, almost like elevator music like with the kalimba sample, but it was fun. We have saved our demo. We can reload it. We can also upload it and share it with others if we want. If you have any interest in MEDO, but the smartphone part you're just like totally against, I'm going to just say up front, not for you. This you need to use your phone to really access what I think makes MEDO special, which is not so much this workspace that it gives you for your songs, but the kind of like social media remixing aspect. So for people who are interested in MEDO, even though I don't think that you should buy something based on features that are not yet present in it, it is cool that as more people use it and make and share sounds for it, it's going to grow in the complexity of its sound palette. A feature I would love to see on here is these spots here, 6, 7, 8, are not used for anything currently. I would love it if there was a way for those to also be sample channels. It would give MEDO, I think, a lot more flexibility, even in the short loops that you'd make with it. And it also would just like, using it as a device for collecting sounds, it would be better at it in that way. Because otherwise, like if I record a sample and I want to grab another sample, I record a sound and then I hear some other amazing sound, I have to get out my phone, connect to it, back up the sample. It would at least give you a little bit of a buffer of samples you could save. I wanted to briefly mention some similarities between the MEDO and the very popular OP1 by Teenage Engineering. And if you're watching this and you're like, Josh, that's crazy. A little, but there's interesting similarities. Both of these devices approach sampling actually like in a similar way. You could also kind of compare MEDO to Teenage Engineering's PO33 knockout pocket operator, but they're focused on an immediacy of sampling and playback. Maybe I would say at the cost of some more like involved sampling features. You're not chopping samples on MEDO, and you can on the OP1 using its drum channels, but it's a bit, I think compared to a device like an SP404, it's not as handy. The other thing that I think is interesting is that both of these feel like more performance-oriented devices. As you saw on MEDO, like on the OP1, you record things by playing them into the device and it plays them back. Now, MEDO is recording MIDI data, so I could change around the patches I have loaded and play back the same song with new sounds, whereas the OP1 is kind of internally resampling. But it was just an interesting comparison that as I was using MEDO, it kind of made me feel like it's like an alternate universe minimalist OP1, which, depending on who you ask, the OP1 might already be kind of minimal. The point is, I thought it was interesting that the feel, the immediacy, and the performance-oriented approach was, in my view, shared between the OP1 and the MEDO. So it should be clear that there's some limitations to MEDO, and I'm put in a bit of an odd place where I do think it's a cool device, but I also don't think that I'm the right customer for it. I mean, really, if you already have a setup, like a music studio setup, I don't think it brings a lot more value to you. I think the ideal MEDOer is someone who is still a bit of a beginner, makes beats maybe like on their phone, and wants some piece of hardware that they can tap beats out on, but doesn't feel the need to like go all in on a more expensive device. Now, the community aspect of MEDO is interesting. Having the online repository of sounds means that as more people use them and as more people share sounds, you get more flexibility. I just don't think that it would be right to put as a strength a feature that only exists hypothetically and isn't there. So it's interesting, and it means that there's room for like more flexibility in MEDO, but it's not something that I think is going on now. And, I can only talk about how it is right now. As far as wishlist features to be added in an update, I'd love to be able to assemble your own drum tracks using your own samples. I'd really like seeing, even if it's just a simplified version of the synthesis program for the computer, put onto the smartphone so that you could change the sounds around a lot more. And I'd really like being able to keep multiple projects on MEDO, or, multiple states of different samples and sounds loaded. I think that those would be features that would take it from good to great and or very good, depending on, how into it you are already. If you're interested in MEDO, check the description. There's a link. Again, I'm not profiting from it, but, if you want to see more about it on Donner's website and potentially order it, it will cost less than the full price new. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching and listening. I'm also working on a video about an older and beloved groovebox. I'm going to keep it a bit of a mystery which one, that I hope you'll be around to see. I don't mean I hope you'll be around in like a threatening way. I'm trying to segue into asking you to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in my next video.